Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Education open agenda meeting, June 11th, 2020. Mrs. Sarajaki, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bauer?
Here.
Mrs. Boroff?
Here.
Mrs. Brody?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Here.
Mrs. Suriani?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Present.
Mrs. Winkler?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Dr. Kulikowski?
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you, Mrs. Sarajaki. Will you please join me in a salute to the flag? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We just had executive session prior to starting this meeting. And at the executive session, we discussed personnel agenda, the legal status report, and a HIB appeal. Date. We have additions to the agenda added today. 7BUS, the district general insurance with figures added. And that's for 2021 calendar year. 9BUS, COVID-19 transportation payment agreement, also for the 2021 calendar year. And 1 POL, approval of board policies, which is being postponed until August. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of public bodies at which business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting by being published and having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Board of Education offices located at 512 Cedar Street, Scotch Plains, New Jersey. Such notice was also provided in written notice and forwarded to the Star Ledger, the Times, the Township Clerk of Scotch Plains, and the Borough Clerk of Fanwood, and the revised annual notice of regularly scheduled meetings adopted on August 29th, 2019. At this time, we have instructional updates. We have the SSDS and HIB reports from September 2018 to December 2019 by Ms. Lisa Mora. Ms. Mora?
Thank you. So tonight I'm going to be reporting on the information that we enter into our SSDS system. The New Jersey Department of Education Student Safety Data System is the SSDS system, and it combines 2 state testing reporting systems, which includes the Electronic Violence and Vandalism Reporting System and the Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying Investigations, Training, and Program System. The Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act requires that twice a year we report to the Board of Ed at a public hearing all acts of violence, vandalism, and harassment, intimidation, and bullying which occur during the previous reporting period. Therefore, I will be going through with you that information entered into the Student Safety Data System, as well as the remediations and consequences we've implemented here in the district. Please note the data presented is based on 5 identified categories and covers the first reporting period, which is from September 1 to December 31st of 2019. In the district, we had 8 incidents of violence. We had 1 incident of vandalism, 0 incidents involving any weapons, and 3 incidents involving substance. As for our harassment, intimidation, and bullying, which is also known as HIB investigations, we had a total of 20 investigations and 11 were confirmed. The status of all these investigations is complete as recorded on our monthly Board of Ed agendas. One of the components of the law is also taking a look at whether any of our HIB incidents were based on protected categories. Those categories are race and or color, religion, ancestry and or origin, gender and or gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, and mental, physical, or sensory disability. Within our confirmed HIB cases, we had 1 based on mental, physical, or sensory disability. We had 3 based on ancestry and or origin, and 3 based on race and or color. As a reminder, this is not an unduplicated number, meaning that 1 case could be on more than 1 protected category. All the other remaining cases were based on what we consider other distinguishing characteristics, which are not included with the identified protected category. All of our investigations are completed by anti-bullying specialists. Each building is assigned an anti-bullying specialist to complete investigations. The investigators include myself, Lisa Mora, Lori Ladovsky, Christine Irusi, Kaylin Franz, Amanda Wolf, Lauren Markowitz, Jason Cross, and Chrissy Krasovsky. Those were the ABSs that completed any investigations for our first period. You were provided with a list of consequences as well as remediation. Some of the consequences imposed for students found to be participating in HIB include parent conferences, detentions assigned, in and out of school suspension, community services, to name a few. We also included Saturday detentions, out of school suspensions, in-school suspensions, students being prohibited from participating in school activities, participating in any kind of bias and sensitivity training, community service, parent meeting, and signing also specific lineup spots. We also looked at a variety of remediations focusing on education. There were classroom lessons which were provided on diversity and accepting differences, as well as the impact of name calling. Some students also received individual lessons on each kindness, handling frustration, social media decision-making, self-advocacy, empowerment strategies, coping skills, making healthy decisions. There was also check-ins with school counselors, student assistance specialists, ongoing counseling support with student assistance specialists, collaboration with any outside therapists, conflict resolution meetings with counselors, check-ins with administrators, increased hallway monitoring, reviewing of the code of conduct policy, increasing supervision at recess, parent conferences, schedule changes, INRS referral, involvement of case manager with special education students, facilitating apologies, teacher notification monitoring, and students being separated within classes. There was also education on the definition of bullying, as well as participation with the Black Student Union and No Place for Hate in creating content for the school on racial sensitivity. There were a number of trainings that were provided to staff focusing on the district HIB policy and anti-bullying Bill of Rights, as well as trainings to improve school climate and culture. All of our staff receives information on the district HIB policy and receives training on the anti-bullying Bill of Rights. There's also training on Green Dot bystander intervention, HIB laws, regulations, school procedures for staff and students. As I mentioned, the HIB policy trainings for administrators as well. There's also Effective School Solution has provided some trainings this year for us, just to name a few. Note that trainings were provided in many different groups, including not only staff, but also we do provide trainings for contracted service providers, substitutes, community members, students, and parents. Trainings are provided both in district as well as out of districts, and with coordination of, whenever possible, our community resources. If you received the list prior to the meeting, you'll see that we also have continue a variety of programming across all grade levels. The district continues to provide lessons on anti-bullying, responsive classroom, behavioral expectations, and kindness. We also have an assortment of programs that foster leadership, service learning. You'll notice some of our programs allow for older students, high school, to provide peer mentorship to younger grades as well. In addition to the diverse programs the district maintains each year, we were also fortunate to have had a number of assemblies bringing in different topics. Some of these include Week of Respect, School Violence Awareness Week, Health and Wellness Week, Start with Hello, leadership programs, opening school climate activities, school wellness committees, hero leadership programs, Agent for Change, law education, scavenger hunts, Green Dot Bystander programs, just to name a few. That kind of wraps up our trainings programs, as well as our numbers involving HIB, as well as everything that we reported on the vandalism reporting system, the electronic violence and vandalism reporting system. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Some of those trainings and assemblies, are they available should we ever have to revert to online learning again throughout the school year?
So that's a really good question. This is all from our September to December. We are currently, right now, principals are completing all of the training and programs for our January to June. So that has been a discussion that we've been having on how, because unfortunately, some of our programs did have to get canceled this spring due to the pandemic. And, what were things that were able to be done remotely? Were there trainings that could be facilitated? I have been receiving certainly more and more information on some online programs and things like that. So if we do need to continue with a remote, that is definitely something that we will need to explore kind of going forward. There wasn't as much, this spring, but I do think in that I'm seeing more and more information kind of coming out, for some online learning opportunities, for the fall, more so than there was for this spring.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions for Ms. Mora?
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too. Okay, next we have the local district special education report, Ms. Lisa Rabimbus. Mrs. Rabimbus.
Good evening, everyone. So each year, the New Jersey Department of Education publishes the local district special education report. The data presented this evening was collected by the NJDOE during the 2018-2019 school year and fulfills the requirements of annual reporting to the public on the performance of each local school district in relation to state targets reported in the annual performance report. The NJDOE identifies 14 target indicators each district must meet. For the 2018-2019 school year, the district was not in the cohort for 3 of the indicators: preschool outcomes, parent involvement, and post-secondary transition outcomes. Therefore, a target was not expected to be achieved in those 3 areas. Overall, the district met targets for graduation rates, dropout rates, suspension/expulsion rates, least restrictive environment for preschoolers, disproportionality, and secondary transition. It partially met the targets for the least restrictive environment for K through 12 students, and it did not meet the targets in the areas of the ESEA accountability data, child find, or early childhood transition. Some interesting things to note from the report: our graduation rate increased from 2017-18 to the 2018-19 school year. Our dropout rate continues to be 0%. NJSLA participation rates for special education students increased to 95.6% in both ELA and mathematics. And the district continues to meet the indicator for least restrictive environment in that 50% of our students with IEPs are in regular classes 80% of the day. 2% of our students are inside the regular class less than 40% of the day. And 7.7% of the students with IEPs are in private or public separate schools. Of note is the drop in the percentage of students who are out of district, which is at 7.7%. And let me clarify, there's 3 different parts in this least restrictive environment, and this is for school-age children. And for 80% of the day, we hit 50%, and the expectation was 50.5%. So we did not meet that indicator by 0.5 of a point. So I misstated at the beginning. And the expectation for students in separate schools was 6.9, and we were at 7.7. And we did not meet that one, but it's still lower than the previous year. We did meet the 2% of students in the regular class, less than 40% of the day. For our preschoolers, 70.7% of the students in preschool are in special education and related services are in our regular early childhood program. So that's an exciting number because over 70% of our students are with general education students. 29.3% of our preschool age students are in a separate class. Those are our self-contained classes. Or a separate school. These 2 areas for our preschoolers exceed the state targets. The district continues to ensure it does not have a disproportionate number of students in special education and related services from various racial groups. So this continues a very positive trend that we are not over-identifying one racial or ethnic group in special education. And we also continue to ensure that we do not have a disproportionate representation of racial or ethnic groups in any specific disability category. So they literally go down to specific learning disability, other health impaired, autistic, and ensure that our racial balances and percentages are on par and appropriate. Finally, of note, this year, the district participated in the mandatory evaluation of the secondary transition program. So the Office of Special Education reviewed our records of students with IEPs to ensure that students who were 16 years or older were invited to IEP meetings. Their IEP meetings were appropriate for post-secondary goals. They included transition services and courses of study that they were taking in high school. So the DOE came in and reviewed our records and interviewed staff, and we were found to be in compliance with all of those requirements. This isn't a yearly evaluation. This is one that goes in a cohort strand once every 3 to 5 years, depending on the DOE's schedule. So that was an exciting piece for us. As always, the district continues to serve its students in special education with creative, academic, social, and emotional programming. Important to note for this school year was the inclusion of individual and group counseling and social skills for our special education and general education students. And we really continued our focus on teacher professional development in the area of reading, with a focus on students in need of multisensory instruction. Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mrs. Winkler.
Can we get a copy of that report?
Yes.
Okay.
It is not out for public yet. It will be soon, but we will provide copies of that to the board.
Just usually when you present it and we're in the boardroom, we see it on the overhead or we have a copy of it it's easier if we can see it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. Anybody else have a question for Mrs. Rubembas? Seeing none, thank you, Mrs. Rubembas. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Kulikowski.
Okay, then we'll move along to our first public comment. And if you would like to make a public comment, please call 908-913-0709. And in accordance with the Scotch Plains Fanwood Public Schools Bylaw 0164 and 0165, the meeting will be open for 15 minutes for public comments. It's a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers addressing the superintendent items, business functions, and other board business will be heard first. If time remains, speakers may address other matters. So if you'd like to make a public comment, please call 908-913-0709. 0709. And
Dr.
callers,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Dr. Kolakowski. Before
go
we
right
move on-
ahead, Doug.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comment, I'd just like to say some things both for the board and for the public as well. I know that it's likely that we're to have some commenters speak about the Field Lights project over at the high school, based on both my participation in the planning board meeting earlier this week, as well as the tap into articles and just the general interest we've seen in this topic over the past few board meetings. And I want to be clear that I'm not in any way trying to discourage people from making comments. I just wanted to kind of set expectations when it comes to those comments. You know, I've made these statements at a few of your board meetings over the course of the past couple of years. And I'd just like to reiterate that it is a public comment section, not a public Q&A. And that's not to say that members of the public can't ask questions, but they should not expect that the board is going to answer all of those questions. That as Dr. Kolakowski, you just stated, and is in the board agenda, the time limit for each comment is 3 minutes, as is normally the case when we have in-person meetings. I'll be keeping time, but as in-person meetings, it's a lot easier to kind of get the ebb and flow of comments and trying to jump in without cutting someone off when their time is up or approaching up. But I might be a little bit more harsh tonight just because of the nature of this virtual meeting. So I'll be jumping in to the extent that anybody is going over 3 minutes, just remind them to wrap up their comments. But at some point we will need to, if people don't wrap up their statements, we will look to end the comments. We'll be as lenient as we can be without being unreasonable to both the board and the rest of the people who want to speak. In terms of the project itself, to the extent that anyone's going to come and ask questions about whether or not a decision has been made as to move forward with the project, I think I speak for the board in saying emphatically that yes, the Field Lights project will be moving forward. This board has discussed this issue with regard to the current project, at least since January, but certainly as a concept for far longer than that. Whether or not there are accommodations that can be made for the neighbors, or if there are suggestions from the people who live in town about the field lights, how they're going to operate, the board's proposed good neighbors policy, things of that nature. Certainly input is still wanted. And to the extent that people still want to express their opposition to the project altogether, they're certainly more than welcome to do so. But I did want to just, again, set the expectations in terms of the comments tonight. Thank you, Dr. Kolakowski.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Silvestro. So callers, please state your full name and the town in which you reside. And again, remember, we cannot respond regarding your concerns about students or staff members. And with those kinds of comments, you have to contact the superintendent's office. So at this time, Ms. Broadbent, do we have any callers on the line?
No, Dr. Kolakowski, there are no calls at this time.
Okay. Well, this is just the first of two open public sessions. So then at this time, we'll close this portion of the meeting since there are no calls. And we'll move on to the committee reports. Does anybody have a committee report at this time?
I do, Dr. Kulakowski.
I'll go ahead, Ms. Soriani.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had it pulled up. Second. Okay. The curriculum committee met on Monday. I had the side-by-side windows. Technology is failing me.
Well, you don't have to see yourself to do your report. If you have it up on your screen, we still see you.
Yes, it went somewhere. Does anyone else have a report, or am I the only one?
Does anybody else have one?
I have a report.
All right,
Good.
Debbie.
Deb can go first.
Okay,
Thank you, Deb.
no trouble. So my report is regarding the subset committee of the finance committee that we meet with the mayors and the town managers. We had our meeting on June 5th, and present at that meeting were Evan Murray, Al Mirabella, Mayor Colleen Marr, Administrator Fred Tompkins, Debbie Saradaki, and Dr. Joan Mast. We've been continuing this meeting every 2 weeks, and it's been really quite successful. This meeting, mostly what we discussed was guidelines related to the schools. At the time, and of course everything changes every day almost, but at the time of the meeting, That's when we had school sanctioned gatherings limited to 25 people, and that we discussed we were planning a live graduation on July 8th. We also discussed the policy that we sent out to the neighbors for the lights, and that we didn't receive much feedback from the residents at that point in time. We discussed the protest march on Thursday, which was the day before our meeting, and that it went very well, and that it was estimated that 1,500 people were there. And we also discussed the upcoming Black Student Union and Alumni March on Saturday, and that went from the high school to the Shady Rest, and the sit-in that was planned at the Scotch Plains Hall on Sunday. To date, our school state aid preliminarily is being reduced by $200,000, and that's the best guess at this point in time. We discuss, and Mrs. Saradaki can give more detail, but we did discuss in areas where we have spent less, and then we discuss where we have spent more. Less is some overtime for custodians because we don't have any events going on, and where we're having to spend more, where were devices that we had to supply for those students that did not have internet. So we bought devices and loaned them out. Over the summer, what will be planned is, well, first of all, over the summer, they're trying to plan for September, but at this point in time, they're really not getting a lot of guidance from the state. So a whole bunch of different plans are being put into place or discussed, ranging from a normal opening with like normal to 100% remote learning to some kind of A and B schedule or a hybrid in between. And this is also due because statewide, 20% of educators are at high risk, and some educators may not be comfortable coming back to school. And they are reviewing how other countries have handled the opening of school and trying to gather as much information as possible. After graduation ceremonies, the administration will pivot into making plans for the fall, and the summer will be used to help train the staff with technology, with online teaching academies to help out for any contingency plans that might happen in September. We are all still analyzing the best tools for remote learning, but we have to consider any additional costs for that. And we're doing everything possible to open school in September. And that was pretty much what we discussed. And we're going to meet again on June 19th at 3:15. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Ms. Brody. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Brody?
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you for that report. I was wondering if there was a deadline date to where a final decision has to be made. How close to the opening of school will we know, or is it an ongoing thing based on the COVID status at that time?
I think Dr. Mass could probably answer it better, but I think it's still just a rolling thing because it changes all the time.
So it's not like by August 15th, we need to know for sure.
Dr. Mask can maybe answer that better than me.
Thank you, Deb.
So I do think, day by day, we will know more. Right now, we feel like we know an inadequate amount of information, and it's quite uncomfortable for districts across the state. I think that we see not only what other countries are doing, but we could see plans for other states. And, it doesn't necessarily apply to New Jersey. It doesn't necessarily apply to our region, which has been a very hot spot for COVID. We know that the state's opening up. We know that people have been out doing a variety of things, going to beaches, going to protests. So seeing the effects of us coming back together as people will give, I think, certainly us more information, but the state too. But we know we can't necessarily just wait for guidance. We do, as Ms. Brody said, we do need to have several contingency plans in place.
Sure.
What I know is the most popular, the most desired, the most prayed for, the most wished for is that school in September will be as close as possible to what school was like this past September. But we don't know if that's what we will get at this time. But we're working towards that.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mass. Anybody else have a question for Ms. Brody? Okay, thank you for your report, Deb.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Stephanie, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I had the agenda, my report,
Okay.
and Google Meets all up, and the Chromebook was not my friend. So I am ready now. The curriculum committee met this week on the 10th. We had 4 agenda items. The first is the modifications that were made to the elementary report card, the pre-K to grade 5 year-end report cards. And Erin Mullman, the elementary supervisor, spoke on the modifications, and the modifications were made to reflect what the kids have been working on during at-home learning. She pointed out that the modifications were a collaborative effort among the principals and administrators. And again, they focused more broadly on the key concept areas of instruction during this time, such as word study, math, writing, and reading. At the end of the report card is a comments section where the teacher can focus a narrative on the individual student, and teachers have received guidance around how to complete the narrative section, how to provide constructive and positive feedback to families based on limitations that they may have had during this time of at-home learning. The report card was designed to be positive and not penalize students who weren't able to maybe get as much work done at others, maybe didn't learn as well in this at-home learning environment, and experienced various other challenges. The report card is going to be available in PowerSchool on the last day of school, and a swift K-12 notice will go out about that. And parents were notified in a letter by Regina Botsford, our assistant superintendent, earlier in the semester about the changes to the report card. So they should be expecting this. The second agenda item was a K through 5 language arts update. We had reported out earlier this academic year about changes to writing and readers workshop, the Teachers College program that we've implemented in our district. And we've had multiple parent sessions about it. There has been a slight modification in that we were originally planning on the writing workshop being rolled out this academic year and the reading workshop being rolled out the next academic year, 2020-2021. However, training that was scheduled to prep teachers for the reading program was supposed to take place this academic year, and the further assessment of the writing program did not happen because of quarantine. So everything is being shifted back a bit. Next year, our district will continue to focus on implementation of the Teachers College writing workshop, including pacing and assessing student progress, which again wasn't able to happen. And the Teachers College reading workshop will now be rolled out in 2021-2022. Okay. The third agenda item was a review of summer assignments for this summer. Dr. Botsford and Dr. Liz McKenna talked about and shared with the committee a list of summer assignments from the elementary and middle school levels to the high school level. For elementary and middle school students, this summer we'll have more choices of texts. Usually there are reading assignments and they're more directive about what the students will be reading. However, this year, due to libraries being closed and limited access to texts, the students are going to have more choice for what they can read. And so instead of book discussions, since all the students wouldn't have read the same texts, they will be able to, again, have more choice, but then use their summer assignments to inform writing in the fall. And also advanced placement and world language courses will also have summer assignments. Every course was different, involving a review of that course's material. The fourth agenda item involved specific summer curriculum work for teachers and administrators this summer. Dr. Mast reviewed which curriculum work will be completed this summer, and much of it involved adjusting pacing for what was completed during at-home learning at the end of this school year. So, for example, for English, grades K through 5, teachers need to go back and reflect on the pacing from the writing program, which I already mentioned during the first year. They need to plan the pacing guide that reflects the Teachers College reading workshop, and GHGR teachers so that there's more alignment. In English, grades 6 through 12, the teachers found it hard to sustain cohesive instruction during virtual learning. So they're going to be just working on how to modify that, and based on whether we'll have school in person or go online next year. So again, reflecting on the curriculum and any changes that need to be made. For math K through 5, they're going to be working on adjusting course pacing documents to reflect changes in content addressed in prerequisite courses due to at-home learning. And same as math 6 through 12, again, adjusting course pacing documents to reflect changes that happen during at-home learning. Science, the curriculum work is going to be focused around developing the curriculum for the new environmental science course, which we approved a few months ago during a board meeting. And social studies, curriculum work is going to focus on identifying areas across the curriculum where additional content and resources can be integrated to ensure diverse cultures are expressly taught in the elementary social studies curriculum. And this agenda item, we're asking the board to vote on the summer curriculum budget of $11,272, which is less than in past years, because a lot of the curriculum work that is being done is really just going back and adjusting pacing due to at-home learning. So again, we're asking for board approval on that agenda item. And that's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Soriani. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Soriani. Are there any other reports to be heard this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Next, we have letters to the board. We have 2 letters that are regarding at-home instruction, which Dr. Mast has communicated with those particular parents. We have a letter, 3LET, regarding the park virtual performance. We have 4LET from June 2nd, dated June 2nd, from Angus McGuire of Madison Polymetric Engineering regarding his company's production of face masks. Informational. Then we had 7 letters regarding high school graduation plans, and Dr. Mast has communicated with those senders of the letter. There was one letter, the 11LET, dated June 2nd, from Maggie Savoca regarding her resignation from the PTA, and Dr. Mast has communicated with Ms. Savoca. Then we had a question, 14LET, about August Ruggiero from June 4th. Suggestions and plans for reopening schools. Dr. Mast has communicated with that person. Then we had another letter dated, well, actually 2 letters, June 7th and June 8th. Both were regarding the field lighting, and Dr. Mast has spoken with those people. And then the 16 LET dated June 8th from Myrna Gordon regarding the high school field lighting project, and 17 LET June 8th from Carol Blank, Director of Programs and Training regarding internet searches for Scotch Plains Fanwood High School.
Dr. Kulikowski, I would just like to add some clarification.
Oh, sure. Go right ahead, Dr. Mast.
So in the first 2 letters where both of these parents really had some helpful insight into at-home learning, should we need to return to it, or some things we need to address. I did directly speak to The first LET, I'm yet to speak with Dr. Keeler, though the statement's accurate. I have spoken to Dr. Keeler on a number of occasions. I haven't spoken to her yet about her most current letter. It is rich with ideas and concepts, and I want to make sure I block off enough time in my schedule for that. So
Thank you for correction me.
that is still to do. And also, when I look at the 12 LET and 13 LET, I did leave a message, but I haven't spoken to those families yet. And in the 15 LET, I did see that Josh Lasardo got back to Mike Spataro, and I didn't really have any additional information, so I didn't speak to Mr. Spataro at this time. But also, I would like the board to know that for all of the letters that the senior parents wrote, it was really at a time where they didn't have the complete picture of what the high school is doing in conjunction with the PTA and the parents to celebrate the seniors. At that time, they had the misconception that we were only doing a virtual graduation. But as you know from additional communications, we're continuing on with the virtual graduation. We believe that the class of 2020 someday, long into the future, will enjoy showing that to their own family of how strange their graduation was. So that will be a good keepsake. And we are having a car parade and also a live graduation. And as you all know, those conditions and the numbers are under daily consideration of how many people can attend. So all of those parents who were very upset, in some cases, they're still very sad that their seniors aren't going to have the type of graduation that their older siblings did or what they expected. But they understand and they see that we are putting our best efforts forward.
Well, thank you for those clarifications, Dr. Mast. Okay, and that brings us to the superintendent's report, Dr. Mast.
How about that?
Yeah.
So 1S, I would like to move that the Board of Education approves the listed private and public out-of-district placements.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. Winkler.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. Is there a second?
Second, Bauer.
Thank you, Mrs. Bauer. Any question or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries.
2S, I would like to move that the board approves the listed additional private and public ESY 20 out-of-district placements.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. Winkler.
Second, Soriani.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. Thank you, Mrs. Soriani. Any question or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries.
Okay, I'd like to group the next three.
All right.
To move that the Board of Education approves the submission of HIB and SSDS for the time period from September 2019 to December 2019 to the New Jersey DOE as Lisa Mora presented this evening.
So moved, Brody.
Second, Williams.
She's grouping them.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I would like to move the Board of Education approves the changes to the 1920 district calendar, moving the last day of school to June 19th. And finally, in this group, move that the Board of Education approves the tools that we've been using for teacher evaluation and administration of the Danielson rubric and the Marshall rubric.
So
for the
moved.
2020 year. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Brody. And the second?
Second, Winkler.
Thank you, Ms. Winkler. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries.
And the remaining will be voted on at the next meeting. Move that the Board of Education acknowledges receipt of the biannual gifts to the following schools: the high school, McGinn, and the high school rep theater. Also move that the Board of Education approves the annual code of conduct as reviewed by the administrative team. And that code of conduct does not reflect changes at this time. And I'd like to move that the board, in cases where action must be taken within the school system, including the hiring of personnel while the board is on recess, that the superintendent is authorized and shall be expected to act. The superintendent's decision shall be subject to review and approval, of course, when appropriate by the board, and it is the superintendent's duty to inform the board promptly of such actions.
Thank you, Dr. Mast. And now, if you will continue with personnel.
Happy to. I would like to move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommendations for personnel on the personnel report dated June 11th in the areas of change of status, leaves of absence, job descriptions, and auxiliary employment.
So moved.
Second, Winkler.
Any questions or discussion? Mrs. Saradaki, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mrs. Winkler,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mrs. Boroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Brody,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Suriani,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
and Dr. Kulikowski.
Yes. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. And I would like to move that the Board of Education approves the listed board officials appointed and reappointed for the 2020-2021 school year.
Can I have a
So
motion?
moved, Winkler.
Second, Brody.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. Thank you, Mrs. Brody. Any questions or discussions on the second list here? Seeing none, Mrs. Saradaki, will you please call the roll for this one too?
Mrs. Winkler,
Yes.
Mrs. Brody,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mrs. Boroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Suriani,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Dr. Kulikowski.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Mast.
Thank you.
At this time, Mrs. Saradaki, business.
Yes, I will first begin with the 2019-20 business functions. One BUS, I'd like the Board of Education to approve the staff training report dated June 11th. Two BUS, I'd like the board to approve the following related service vendors for 2020-2021 for ESY. I'm not sure that's why that's under 1920, but anyway, and this is for various students during the summer. 3 BUS, I'm asking that the board approve EnviroVision Consultants to perform asbestos professional services in conjunction with the asbestos remediation in the culinary arts classroom. The cost of the air monitoring will not exceed $4,278.94. These funds will be withdrawn from capital reserve. And the actual asbestos removal, I'm asking that the board approve B&G Restoration, which was our lowest quote, in the amount of $3,400 for the asbestos removal for the culinary classroom renovation. Funds will be withdrawn from capital reserve. What has happened there, just so everyone knows, is that they had pipes that they had partial vision on, and they thought they went straight down through the floor. And all the remediation had already been done in the room below, which is the boiler room. So they didn't think there was asbestos. What happened was the pipes went down partway through the wall and went across the wall, the entire walls. And these are pipes that are not currently in use. And so they couldn't visually see the asbestos before taking down the wall. So we did not know that that would be inside the wall. And then I'd like to, let me see, 9 BUS. The COVID-19 has altered what we'll be paying for transportation. And I have potential agreements, if the board is in agreement, with Durham, which is part of National Express Company. And they're looking for 39.8% of their payment for March 16th through May 8th, and 53% of their payment from May 9th through June 30th. And K&S, they're a much smaller company, and they're looking for 65% of their payment on April 1st through June 30th. The reason they can't grant us anything for the second half of March is, like many people, they thought it was a short-term time that we would be closed, and they did pay their drivers for that time period. And that's everything under 2019-20.
Mrs. Saradaki, just one clarification.
Yes.
For 2 BUS, related service vendors.
Yes.
The creative speech should be for school year 2019-2020. So the top line where it says related services for school year 2020-2021, that should be deleted. It's for this school year.
Then that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Saradaki, if I may, on 9 BUS, have these proposed amendments to the contract been submitted to or discussed with the executive county superintendent yet?
No, are they supposed to be?
Yeah, I would recommend, I'm okay if the board wants to approve these tonight, but with the condition that they be submitted to the county. Technically, any amendment to a school bus contract has to be approved by the county, just like the regular contracts do. So,
okay.
I just, if the board votes on it tonight, that's fine. I just like the board to know that it would be subject to county approval.
Okay, thank you. Because when our county BA explained about doing this, she didn't mention that. So
I know a number of counties, and I haven't dealt with Union County on this issue yet. I know a number of counties have been trying to stay away from this, but the code does explicitly say any amendments or addendums to a school bus contract do have to be approved by the county office.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's the 2019-20.
Okay. So do we have a motion for these 5 plus number 9?
Winkler.
Winkler?
I'm sorry.
Okay. And is there a second?
Second, Boroff.
Thank you, Ms. Boroff. Is there any questions or comments about these issues that we're going to vote on?
I have a question for Debbie. I'm just wondering, on the culinary arts classroom, are we still on track for completion? When is the target date for that project to be completed? I know it's been going on for a little while.
Well, no, we couldn't start the actual classroom until after we knew for sure that school was closed for the year. And that we kept closing for periods of time, but not for the year. So, but we are on track. The goal is to be done by mid, and so far we're on track for that. There was other work they were able to divert to doing until the asbestos was handled.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Bauer?
Mrs. Saradaki, can you explain to the public why we're paying for bus contracts when there's no busing going on?
This was a mandate from the state that all our contracts had to be honored. And the one place that they allowed some variance was in our transportation contracts, where we could negotiate a lower rate based on the bus companies essentially deducting from the price. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but the costs that they are not incurring at the time, which would be their driver costs, their fuel costs, and some of their maintenance costs.
Correct. The new law, and I think we've discussed this a little bit in exec previously, but the law basically requires that schools continue to pay service providers, even though they're not providing service during the shutdown, for their fixed costs. So the negotiations entail, and this is happening across the state with every provider you could imagine, has to do with what those fixed costs are. And since the legislation wasn't adopted until mid-April, well, a month well after the shutdown happened, a number of the companies did lay off their drivers. So you're seeing much reduced rates. A lot of bus companies were originally asking for 95% of their contract costs, but obviously they don't have those anymore because their drivers aren't currently on payroll. And that's why you see these reduced numbers now.
And if I'm not mistaken, that is for school districts. It's not for towns, right?
That's correct. The legislation was explicitly passed only with respect to school districts. And it is, of course, something that the school districts did not receive any extra funding for.
Thank you. I think it's important for the public to know.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Mrs. Bauer. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so then can we say aye if you're approving 1 through 5 plus 9?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries.
Okay, now I'll cover what I'll be talking about for the next board meeting, which is 5BUS. 5BUS we've included on the agenda strictly because of the option it allows. We do not anticipating transferring money to capital reserve and maintenance reserve. As discussed previously, the most likely scenario is that we'll be giving that money back to taxpayers. But if anything changes and we want to deposit, this allows us to. If this is not voted on in June, we cannot transfer to capital reserve or maintenance reserve. 6BUS, I'll be asking for the board to acknowledge receipt of the monthly reports, the board secretary report, the treasurer's school funds report, and the budget adjustments. 7BUS, I'll be asking the board to acknowledge receipt of various disbursement listings. 8BUS, I'll be asking for the board to approve the bill list, and that's it. Then we go on to 2021 contracts, and these are all to be voted on next time. 1BUS, we have a bid for custodial supplies that's out that we're anticipating receiving next week. 2BS, we have the bid for electrical supplies that we anticipate receiving next week. And 3BUS, we have a bid for our lease purchase for 2021 that we anticipate receiving next week. 4BUS will be the renewal of our facility applications for 2020, 2021. 5BUS will be increasing the bid threshold effective July 1st. The state has announced about every 5 years they raise the bid threshold, and the bid threshold is increasing from 40,000 to 44,000. This in effect means that if costs come in under 44,000, we still obtain quotes, but we do not need to formally bid for items. 6BUS, I'll be asking the board to approve the Pay Schools annual software licensing and the depot hardware and software support for our QSP system, which is our point of service system in our cafeterias. 7BUS, I will need, unless there's questions that take some time to answer, I would like the board to vote on this evening so we can move forward our insurance for next year. And that is Arthur J. Gallagher coordinates our general insurance. And you actually see a total overall, even though you see some significant price increases and decreases, overall, it is a almost 1% decrease in cost. So 7 BUS
We have a motion.
So moved, Winkler.
Second, Brody.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
I do have a question. What's the reason for it going down? Is there any logic to it, or is it just what it is?
A huge part of it is our workers' compensation. We've been working on different things to improve our workers' compensation rating. Mr. Patuco and I, along with our agent, have put in a couple of cost-saving measures, including, I'm sorry, Peter, what is it? When they come back to work when they're not fully well. If somebody injures.
Modified duty.
Modified duty, thank you. I couldn't think of the word, but we've instituted modified duty, which has kept a lot of people on the job. And we have overall, the rate has reduced. It also helps, it'll help us next year that people weren't in school for these 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Not in 2021, but in 2021, 22.
Mm-hmm.
Because injuries haven't taken place that would normally take place.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other question or comment? We had a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any abstaining? Any opposed? Motion carries.
So 8 BUS is our frontline renewals, and you'll see that they went up 4.85% across the board. And this is for all our absence software. We used to call it ASOP, our applicant tracking, IEP Direct, employee evaluation system, which we use in conjunction with our evaluation program, and professional learning management, for a total of $92,218. 9 BUS will be our Systems 3000 renewals, which net increase is 3%. 10 BUS is a renewal of our professional services contract with Energy for America, which has gone up 1%. 11 BUS is a tuition agreement with Union County VOTEC schools, which has no increase in their tuition for next year. And this is the VOTEC, the magnet schools, both for our general education students and our special education students. 12 BUS are the Union County Services Commission agreements for next year, which include the special education tuition contract, professional services. They handle our non-public, many of our non-public allocations on, the non-public textbooks, non-public technology, non-public school nursing, non-public security aid, non-public IDEA-B, and chapters 192, 193, which don't have non-public in the name, but they are non-public services. 13 BUS, I'll be asking the board to approve our independent E-rate consultant at no change in cost at $4,800. 14 BUS, I'll be asking for the appointment of our insurance risk manager, which is through Arthur J. Gallagher Risk Management Services. And 15 BUS, I'll be asking for the appointment of our employee benefit agent, which is Centric Benefits Consulting. 16 BUS, I'll be asking for appointments of architects of record, which we use Potter Architects and EI Associates. 17 BUS, I'll be asking for the renewal of our appointment of bond counsel, and that's Phoenix Advisors, and there is no increase in their costs either. It's still at $4,000. It has been for several years. And that's it for 2020-21. The procedural, I'll summarize them, briefly go over them this time. But nothing has changed from last year. They're the payment of invoices through August 2020, parliamentary procedures, universal minimum chart of accounts, collection and maintenance of student records, authorization of budget transfers, the petty cash fund, our tax shelters, both 403B and 457, the mandatory direct deposit program, the report of awarded contracts, the board policy manual, and the existing agreements that we have with our associations.
Wow. Thank you, Mrs. Saradaki. Is there anything else?
That's it. I tried to make it as quick as possible.
And you did. Thank you. All right. We'll be taking care of that in our next meeting. At this time, board policy.
I think that Amy
Questions?
had a question about Ed's report.
I'm sorry.
I froze for a second. I just wanted to, if we could just jump back to Deb. I have a quick question because we normally don't see increases that quite that high, but for 8 and 9 BUS for frontline renewals under 2021 and Systems 3000, is that it seems like a high jump of 4.85%. That's we just don't normally see that. Was that higher than normal?
No. What has happened is this company has now established itself basically as a monopoly in the market. And we are kind of stuck paying whatever increases they want unless we go to periodically look out there, but and we probably will again in the next year. But oftentimes the other software providers aren't to the caliber that this software is.
So had they previously raised it at a high percentage also?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think also, Debbie, wasn't it that they actually tried to increase such a lot higher over the past few years and we came up with a schedule so it didn't hit us all in one year?
Yes, because they were actually increasing us, I think, in some of the areas over 30%.
Yeah.
So we backed them down and had them bring us up a little slower.
They had promised that they would get us there, but over time.
We're there now, and that's why all of the software packages are the same increase. I think that's the increase that we will probably be seeing in the future.
Mrs. Bauer?
I wanted to go back to 5 BUS. So as a taxpayer, I'm all for having lower taxes. But before we return things to the taxpayers, I know there's this fast track bill. It's already passed. I think it's the Senate. I forget if it's the Senate or the Assembly, and it's fast tracked. And the other one related to Chapter 78. And and of course, we expect the other cuts to come in August. So before we're returning money that we think is a surplus, are we taking those two things into consideration? Because I just was around back in 2007 or 8 when we were cutting many staff members, and I don't want to be in that same situation.
Yes, our decision on what we do as far as actually whether we deposit money somewhere, whether we return money to the taxpayers, whatever we decide to do, that decision does not have to be finalized until we're working with the auditors and when they're almost done with the audit. So that usually is in the October timeframe. So that would be after that law would have had to have come into effect.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Bauer. Are there any other questions or comments from Mrs. Saradaki regarding business functions? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move along. Policies. Mrs. Winkler, did you want to say anything about this?
Yes, just that we are postponing the adoption of policy 7510.3, which is our athletic field lighting policy, until our August meeting. in order to give additional time for the neighbors if they want to get any more comments to us before we finalize this policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkler.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any new board business? Seeing none. Other board business? Are there any requests to attend workshops or workshop reports?
I have
Mrs. Winkler?
two quick reports. One of them is on June 4th. I attended what is called the Restart Ed Town Hall. That was their first meeting was last Thursday. They are having one during this meeting, which I hope I can go back and rewatch. I hope they're recording it. It was a panel of educators, mostly I think from New Jersey, but there was one person there who was from Ohio, talking about what it will take to open schools again and what sort of constraints we have, what sort of direction we still need to get. On the discussion was David Adderhold, who is superintendent at West Windsor Plainsboro. He's also currently serving as president of Garden State Coalition of Schools. Chuck Sampson, who is the superintendent at Freehold Regional High School District. There were a few other individuals on the call. It was a panel discussion. And it was interesting as they talked about different things that we need to look into. They were talking about extracurricular activities. They were talking about, when are we going to see a return to sports based on what the National Organization for High School Sports is talking about now. There will be no contact sports going forward for the foreseeable future. It sounds like maybe fencing is one of the only sports that may continue because people wear masks and are at least the length of their foils apart from each other. They talked about PPE purchasing for schools. Would it go through the county cooperatives? And then logistically, how does that affect supply chains for hospitals and medical facilities, if school facilities are going to be ordering PPE as well, and at what cost to the districts will that be? They talked about busing. They talked about based on 6-foot separation of people on buses, there could be a maximum of approximately 11 to 15 kids on a school bus, depending on how they're spaced in the seats. And then it's not financially viable to be running school buses. And but we're required to be busing certain kids to school. And right now the state has a shortage of bus drivers. So there was a lot that they discussed. They talked about how are we going to stabilize our budgets for the school year. We know we're looking at a number of expenses that we don't normally have. What's it going to look like? Are we going to have to hire additional nursing staff so that they can take temperatures of students and staff as they enter the buildings every day? Are we going to have to build isolation rooms for the nurse's office in case that a kid starts showing symptoms of COVID during school? Will we have to isolate them in some way? And how will that affect our HVAC systems? Or we're going to have positive airflow pressure in an isolation space for a child? There was quite a bit that they talked about that still we're going to need direction from the state on. It was a very interesting phone call, and I know they recorded it. I'm still not entirely sure where you can see it, but if I do, because I'm going to be looking for the meeting they had tonight, which was about social emotional learning moving forward when we open schools. And if I can find these links, I will pass them on to you. It was well worth the time. So that was that report. I also, earlier today, New Jersey Spotlight had a sort of a town hall meeting, schools out, what's working in remote learning. And on the call, John Mooney was moderating. He had a teacher who teaches preschool and kindergarten in South Jersey. Chuck Sampson, the superintendent from Freehold Regional High School District, was also on the panel. There was a 6th grade teacher in Trenton in a public school who also spoke, and a parent who is a PTA president in Monmouth County. And they talked about different things that were working in their schools and things that were not working with students remotely. I'm sorry, because this one my notes are scribbled down as I heard them. I didn't have a chance to go through this, but they talked about how being online forced a lot of the teachers who maybe weren't super technical to learn quickly how to use the technology, and that maybe this is an advantage for districts that, if those teachers didn't have professional development on it before, they certainly do now. There was talk about one of the teachers said that she created class captains in her class. She said that she would go online and whoever showed up for her Google Meets on a regular basis, she made them class captains and made them responsible for communicating with their classmates, making sure that everybody got what was going on in the class. Not everyone could attend the Google Meets, and it helped to connect classmates to each other, which helped them with socialization in this remote environment. They talked about how the remote learning forced families to get much more involved in their children's education than they had been before, and forced teachers to have more connections to families, that they sent a lot of information home to families on how they can better support their students. And there was just a lot more communication there than had been before. They talked about grading and how grading has been affected by this and what was done in different districts. Chuck Sampson talked about using different tools for gauging performance, and how moving forward, even when we're in person, we may start seeing changes to how grading is done based on other metrics than what we were using before. They talked about offering a lot of choice, as they didn't really know what student situations were at home. And so they had to be very creative about what they offered. And they talked about a combination of using Google Classroom or YouTube videos. And some talked about picking one platform was less confusing for kids and families, that like if you used Google Classroom, do everything through the Google Classroom platform, or if you had a different platform that you were using, try to do everything through that, especially with the younger students. What else? One teacher talked about using something on the Google platform called Jamboard, which essentially allows each student to have their own whiteboard, and that they would do lessons where kids wrote their things on their whiteboards. And then at the end of the lesson, they would do like a museum walk where they would go through everybody's whiteboard and see what was what. And it was great for formative assessments. They talked about the differences between taped instruction or live instruction and when one might be better than another. They talked about Chuck Sampson mentioned that in his school district, they mandated that all assignments must be posted by 8 a.m. every day. And then that helped students who were unable to log on at specific times. At least they always knew that by 8 a.m. all the assignments would be there for them. They talked about students who didn't seem to connect and how to get in touch with them, what to do to follow up with them so they wouldn't fall off the radar. And teachers talked about reaching out by phone when necessary. One teacher said that she would stop by houses if she had to try to get a hold of her students. She said that, it wasn't encouraged and her district wasn't happy about it because of social distancing, but she would stand outside and she would ring the bell and then back up, and at least she'd get to see her students. They talked about the problems that we're going to experience come September, assuming that we're meeting in person, but even if we're not, trying to assess where students are at and what they may or may not have gained from this at-home learning. They talked about being flexible, and they talked about adding additional diagnostics in September in order to determine where students are at and what to do. Partnering more with parents. They talked about having a more whole child focus moving forward, that a lot of teachers needed to have that whole child focus for the at-home learning, and that they're hoping that they can pull that into the coming school year.
Sounds like a great meeting.
It was really great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Mrs. Winkler. Anybody have any questions for Mrs. Winkler? Mrs. Bauer?
It's not really a question, but if Mrs. Winkler had your head spinning with the first part, with all the questions that need to be answered, and just for the public too, because I know the board knows about the Garden State Coalition of Schools website, but all these many questions, I think they're up to 280 now of these head spinning questions, are at the very top of that website. And I think it reminds us to take our hats off to all the administrators in school districts, including ours, who are trying to deal with these many, all very important questions with up to now no guidance.
Thank you, Mrs. Bauer. Well spent. Well said. Any other questions or comments? Okay. 2 OBB, adoption of resolution for negotiating service. Do we have to do that one this week? Because it's not starred. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Saradaki. We'll look at that at our next meeting on the 25th. 3 OBB, we'll be appointing the treasurer of school monies at next meeting. 4 OBB, legal counsel for special education, will also be discussed at our next meeting. As will be 5 OBB, the board attorney will discuss and vote on at our next meeting. Also at our next meeting, we'll be approving the minutes from the May 12th open agenda meeting, both the executive session and the open agenda meeting, as well as the May 28th regular board meeting, executive session, and the regular open board meeting on May 28th. At this time, it brings us to our second public comment session. So if you would like to make a public comment, please call 908-913-0709. In accordance with the Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Education Public Schools Bylaw 0164-0165, the meeting will be open for 15 minutes for public comments, with a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers addressing the superintendent items, business functions, and other board business will be heard first. If time remains, speakers may address other matters. So if you'd like to make a public comment, please call 908-913-0709. And when you call, please state your full name and the town in which you reside. Please note, board members cannot respond regarding concerns of individual students or staff members. Such matters should be addressed with the superintendent's office.
Mr. Ruggiero, are you calling the Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Ed? Okay, I'll hold you up to the mic if you would just state your name and the town that you're from. Hold on one moment, please. Dr. Kulikowski, we do have a call. Go ahead, Mr. Ruggiero.
Thank you, Ms. Broadbent.
Go ahead, Mr. Ruggiero. Hold on. Start over, Mr. Ruggiero. I'm sorry.
Okay. We do have a call. Go ahead, Mr. Ruggiero.
Mr. Ruggiero, if you could turn down the sound on your computer or your television, whatever you're watching on, because there's feedback.
Okay, I'll turn down the volume on my computer. Start over, Mr. Ruggiero. I'm sorry. Okay, just 1 minute. I'm turning down the volume on the computer. Okay. My name is August Ruggiero from the town of Scotch Plains, and I wrote letter 14 LET to the board. I'm a former member of the Board of Education, and I have discussed this plan that I've presented to the board in this letter, and I was wondering if the board had any questions or was interested in pursuing this type of approach to reopening schools.
Mr. Ruggiero, I personally did not see the exact plan that you had put in place, so I cannot answer to that at this time.
Dr. Kulikowski, I did speak with Mr. Ruggiero, and I would like to discuss with the board some of his suggested approaches to opening school. Some of the things that he mentions, Ms. Winkler mentioned from her earlier report out from a meeting, but it's something that when we're beyond graduation, the board is going to be very much focused on the next step, and at that point, we will take a close look at your suggestions.
Thank you, Dr. Mast. And thank you for sharing those with us, Mr. Ruggiero.
You said the board has not read the letter. Will the board be receiving the letter before June 28th?
We have received the letter, but the individual members did not receive the letter as yet. Dr. Mast had responded.
Yes, does the board actually read the letters that are sent to it?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Okay, at the June 28th meeting, we will be able to discuss it at that point.
We don't have that agenda ready yet.
Is that June 25th?
The
June 28th, the regular public meeting.
There's not a lot of guidance from the state right now related to plans, so certainly we'll look and read what you have.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not sure that public comment is a time when we would address a specific plan.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Kulikowski, it appears Dr. Mast may have fallen off.
Yes, he's back.
Okay.
Dr. Mast? The question from our caller was that, were we going to discuss his plans at our next board meeting?
You're muted, Dr. Mast.
Yes, we will discuss his plan at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your call, Mr. Ruggiero. Ms. Broadbent, are there any other callers on the line?
Dr. Kulikowski, there are no other calls at this time.
Okay, we'll just take a moment and I'll just review the upcoming meetings before we close that session. Our next meeting is Thursday, June 25th, which is a regular public board meeting at 7:30, which will be online and live stream. No meetings in July. And our meeting in August, there will only be one, which would be on Thursday, August 27th, which will be a regular public meeting. So, Ms. Broadbent, did we have any other callers yet? Just trying to allow enough time.
No other calls at this time, Dr. Kulikowski.
All right, then I'm going to close that portion for public comment and move on to remarks for the good of the order.
I have a comment. Tanya
Yes,
Williams.
Tanya, go right ahead.
So I just want to comment on the peaceful protests we had the past week, and especially the one that was on Thursday that was actually organized by a couple of our young alumni, Colby White and Morgan Johnson. They did a phenomenal job. It was peaceful. All the issues and events that have been going on, Scotch Plains family is not immune to it. And it was nice to see a collaboration of the community and the students and family members. It was absolutely wonderful. And they're asking to be heard. That was a message that was clear. And I just want to, speak with them and just say that, it is going to be different this time. And we're going to work together to make sure that their voices are heard and what's been going on. We're in this together with them. So I just wanted to make that comment. Education is where it starts, and we're going to get there.
Well, thank you, Ms. Williams. I appreciate your comments and those to the students. Are there any other remarks for the good of the order?
I have something, Karen, and Tanya, that gave me a good place to segue with speaking about student voice. But there wasn't a spot in the agenda for liaison reports. I wasn't sure whether this was something for a liaison report or the good of the order. But the members of the Truth and Racial Healing and Transformation Committee, we didn't have a regular meeting, but we kicked off our listening tour last night. And that's going to be a series of kind of virtual meetings where we'll invite various groups of our community to address concerns regarding race, make suggestions, comments, and the committee, which is obviously members of the Board of Education, the town, mayors, council people, our TRHT leader from Rutgers University, members of the ministerium. So various community stakeholders are going to be on the line, able to answer questions, but mainly just listen to where people are coming from and what people want to see change. And so Tanya spoke about the students really leading some of the protests, and our next listening tour will be next Wednesday night, and the students are going to be invited to speak. And so that's going to be really interesting. And we got some great comments and thoughts and ideas and suggestions last night, everything from integrating more about Black history into the curriculum to looking at specific curricula that are anti-racist curricula, concerns about hiring more Black faculty, and we were able to kind of address to the public that we do have strategic planning coming up in the fall, and hopefully, they can come and participate, and this will become part of our strategic plan. But I just found it very enlightening and educational, and just wonderful to hear what some of the community members talked about. So I'm looking forward to hearing specifically from the students next Wednesday, and everyone can there will be advertisements posted on, I'm not sure exactly what time. Will be 7 again? Amy, do you know? Or
I'm not sure.
But look out for those flyers, virtual flyers, and if anyone can come and listen to other members of the community.
So that's what I was going to ask, is where are these things posted?
So it was posted on the Fanwood page and Scotch Plains Town page. I think both mayors posted it. Social Justice Matters is also a great place to look. Social Justice Matters Facebook page. Did we have it on our page, Dr. Mast, or anything?
We did tweet it out with the SPF Proud, and when we get the flyer, we will make sure that we connect it in an email to all the board members too.
Socialjusticematters.org. It's not a Facebook page.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Soriani. Thank you for your help with that, Mrs. Winkler, as well. And thank you, Dr. Mass, for posting it when it becomes available to you. Any other remarks for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none. So our next meeting will be on Thursday, June 25th. And I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Williams.
Second, Board.
Thank you. Any question or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I didn't think so. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.